Hi, it's Ashley from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and I have a little bit of that buttercream left over. This is the American buttercream that I've been using in the past couple videos, and I'm going to spread this out all along my already crumb coated. A couple things that I wanted to make note of is that there is 2 dowels inside of this cake, but there are no in-between board supports, which I normally would put in if this were supposed to be for a customer or just for somebody else other than my family. So make sure that you check out this video in the right-hand corner if you want to know how to actually support an extra tall cake. This has been in the fridge overnight, crumb coated, and now I'm just going to cover it. This makes it a lot easier. Now I realize this is not the smoothest job that I could have done. This is because I actually don't have a big enough bench scraper to make sure that this can be smooth. So that is one of my biggest downfalls here. I'm trying my best. I'm using this metal spatula, but honestly, I need a larger bench scraper. So make sure you invest in one of those if you're going to actually make extra tall cakes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making the cake lace. And I actually got this full recipe from a video here on YouTube, which I will link down in the description box below. Now what I first did was take that warm water and mix in the Tylose powder. Now if you've ever made edible glue, this is how you make edible glue. You basically sprinkle in the Tylose powder with some warm water. Now that was a little bit chunky for a little bit. Now the recipe actually stated that you are supposed to leave that set until no chunks are in there, and I highly recommend you follow this. However, I will say that once I added in all of the cornstarch and the icing sugar as well and mixed it all together, although there were chunks in this mixture, which I know there isn't supposed to be, but even though there were chunks, once I mixed it up and I let it set for even a little bit longer, it was totally fine. And actually, I do end up spreading this with a few chunks here and there, but it doesn't actually show up in your cake lace. So I was very, very grateful that it was forgiving. Now, of course, I would recommend that you wait just longer until all of that Tylose powder is fully dissolved. Especially if you are making an edible glue, you're going to want all of those little chunks to be dissolved. Now, believe it or not, this was actually my very first time making cake lace. I've never done it before. I've been intimidated by the process. I thought that you needed to purchase a special mixture in order to make this, so I kind of shied away from it. It's been on the market for a while, but I personally just never did it. Now, I placed that in the oven at 175 degrees Fahrenheit, and the recipe actually states to do it at 110 degrees Fahrenheit, but my oven doesn't go that low. So the first time I tried to peel that off there, it wasn't quite dry enough. So my magic number was 13 minutes in the oven at 175 degrees Fahrenheit. And what you want to do is you just want to slowly peel that back. Now, as I was peeling this back, I was terrified of breakage, but this is such a weird texture that I can't even fully articulate with words what it actually feels like. It's very bendable, it's pliable, but it is also slightly delicate, and I will say, though, that you can actually play around with this quite a bit. It's not going to snap on you if you bend. So I personally give major props to this original recipe. It's great, and I love it when I try new things and they're not so delicate to the point where I can't actually work with it. Now, if you do get a little bit of tearing, I would suggest that you next time leave it in your oven for just a little bit longer. You can also dry this overnight, but who has the time to wait overnight for things like this? Just dry it out in your oven for that 12 to maybe even 15 minutes, and if you can, go a little bit thicker with it. You also want to make sure that that paste mixture gets into every little nook and cranny. Now, I will say that probably different molds perform in different ways. I just received this mold from that huge haul that my friend gave me when she cleared out her bakery, so I definitely want to go out and purchase more molds. And to attach that, I just used a little hint of shortening. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to work on a different type of flour. Yay! Everybody should cheer for me because, as you know, I always like to use that rose structured flour. But today I'm going to attempt to make this gardenia. Now I have made this in past, but it always ended up kind of looking like a rose. Now, to be fair, gardenias kind of look like a rose a little bit, but as you can see, I'm looking at a picture so that I don't make this look identical to a rose. Now for the base of this, I am using modeling chocolate today, but if I had it my way, I would definitely use a lollipop. I just didn't have any left on hand. Now I like using modeling chocolate as the base for the flowers over fondant. The reason is when I do it with fondant, I find that I have to wait for that fondant to dry up nice and hard, whereas with the modeling chocolate, it's a little bit firmer, especially if you place it in the freezer first for a little bit to firm it all up. And as I'm placing all of these petals on, I'm just cutting each of the cutters and making sure that I level up in size each time, and then I just adhere it with a little bit of water as I see fit to maintain the look of this gardenia. Now you might be wondering, how come sometimes water is used, sometimes steam is used, and sometimes edible glue is used? I tend to use water if I'm doing things like florals. It just makes things a lot easier. If it's something heavier than a petal, then I do go for the steaming or I go for the actual edible glue. Now what I'm doing is I've placed the majority of that flower directly onto my cake, and when I'm doing the larger petals, I like to build on the cake. This just helps with structure and helps to speed things up. I really don't like waiting around for things to dry. However, let's say I was doing a wedding cake that was packed with florals, I would make the florals and dry them on like a drying rack, and then I would place them in. But if I'm just doing one or two things on a small cake, then I generally just make them as I go. And now what I'm doing is I'm airbrushing with actually the same airbrush color that I used in the original American buttercream that covered the cake. I just used a tiny dot for that, and then I ombrayed it out with that same airbrushing, and then I airbrushed the flower a little bit just to make sure that all of that came together. And of course here I'm using my special rose cutter, the one that I love to use all the time, just to add one or two roses to bulk things up. And I have made so many videos using this. You can go ahead and check out this one in the right hand corner where I show you how to use the lollipop trick, as well as just show you how to use that. Now I really didn't like the beaded border that I did before, which is why I completely glazed over that. I did add some edible pearls to the bottom here, and now I'm using this tiny little star tip to create these rosettes. I got a very vintage vibe from this cake. It took everything I had not to add any gold to this. I was thinking of making that lace silver, which you can totally do. All that you have to do when you're working with cake lace that you want to make a different color, once you peel that back from the mold, you can place it on a piece of parchment, and then you can dust it with luster dust to create whatever color you want, or you can also airbrush it. Totally your choice. Then at the top here, I'm going to continue that border, make those rosettes all come together, and I generally try to do this if I'm ever introducing an element that maybe I want to make sure is fully ingrained in the whole cake, then I will do that and add it to different places. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a sugar lace bow. Once I discovered how sturdy this stuff was, I decided I can go the distance with this and I can do a lot of things with this. So as you saw, I just cut it with regular scissors there. Make sure you clean your scissors, and then I'm using some of that paste that hasn't hardened and dried up yet, and I'm creating a bow. And I'm creating a bow in the exact same way that I would for fondant. The only difference is I'm not tucking in that top and bottom edge like I normally do. You also want to make sure that you do this fairly early on, and you want to make sure that nothing has dried out, because as soon as this dries up a little bit, you won't be able to bend it. I don't know the exact time frame of when your sugar lace will dry out, but I'm assuming you should do it fairly quickly after it's been taken out of the oven and has cooled. Now what I'm doing is I'm wrapping around that middle section. I'm just putting a little bit of that edible paste on there to make sure that everything sticks together. And I gotta say, this is a pretty solid bow, and what's great about this bow is it's so light. It's not like when you have a fondant bow or a modeling chocolate bow and things are heavy, so you gotta wait for things to really dry. This is going to stick on with little to no effort, and I'm putting a few of these tails on there just so that the bow looks like it has some of those ribbon tails coming out of it. Now here is our finished cake. I am in love with this lace, and you see I put a little bit of a patch of lace there behind the flowers too. I just love incorporating all of those elements together, making things work together. This is such a great skill to have in your back pocket. This is definitely one of those things that I've seen on Instagram over and over again, but when it comes to actual cakes that I've seen online that are close to me in my local area, I don't see this technique done a lot. So it might be something that's very special that you might want to learn to do so that you can offer it at your bakery. Now let's get into the pricing of this cake. And once again, guys, I live in a very expensive city in Canada in an expensive province, so keep in mind that this pricing might be higher than yours, but I would charge $175 Canadian. To get a really good idea of how to price your cakes, it's best if you look at a series of my videos so you can really see where my pricing lies and the price differences between each style of cake. Now let's get into the specifics of this cake and why I would charge $175. I think that lace is, again, like I mentioned, something that's a little bit rare to do. So I would charge definitely more for that skill. And also the molds are not cheap for these. Creating sugar flowers is also an acquired skill, as well as all of that little rosette piping and making sure that this looks fairly smooth on the outside. So definitely all of those things combined with the ingredients that it takes to make this, that is how I came up with the $175 price tag. Keep in mind, a lot of my pricing is very middle of the road for my area. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Now, one thing that I always continually keep forgetting to say is please follow me on Instagram at SD Bake Shop. Bye!